So the other video were about Nix package, mostly how to interact, enrich it, and distribute it. I didn't put a NixOS introduction video, and I thought it might be useful. So I would show you how to have a running NixOS distribution on Virtualbox. So from the home page, you have one of those images which you can download. After downloading, you can import the appliance that you downloaded with Virtualbox. Okay, we've imported it. Now you can play with the settings, and I quite like to first of all go to General, Advanced, and have a bidirectional shared clipboard. That's going to be useful. I like also to increase the memory. I have 16 gigs or so on my host, so there's no harm in it. Oops, I went out. Let's go back. That's mostly the important things. And regarding the storage, we have this default drive which is 10 gigs, and that could be a problem, in which case there's a procedure for increasing the size. I might show it later, but for now that's good. We might also want to add some port forward in order to access the SSH of our guest. So the host IP will be this guy, and we'll bind it to port 660.22 and guest IP whatever it is, and that's going to be port 22, so that when we want to SSH we can hit localhost 6022. Here we go. Now if we power that on, we should have a running NixOS box. We can go to all configuration, there's only one. Otherwise just let it pick the default one. And the default user is called demo, and the password is demo. And we can log in to the graphical user interface. Now I've mentioned there are a few tricks, and I will show you what was not really clear in the manual and why it's the case. Let's put it up and bring a terminal which is called console in NixOS. Console. So the configuration is in etc NixOS, and that is, if we change the configuration of our box, we will issue the command nixOS rebuild, and then some command which you can find on the doc, but one of the useful one is switch, which will take the configuration file which is located here in etc NixOS and build a new box from that specification. The problem is that the default configuration.nix doesn't come with like the graphical interface or anything, so it's kind of a strange thing. The box which is built doesn't contain itself the configuration file from which it is built. You can see that if I do nixOS rebuild switch So let's make the mistake of building that box. So when it rebuilds, it tries to detect all the things that I've changed. So for instance, if it didn't change the SSH configuration, it would leave it alone. If it has to reboot, then it would reboot. That might take some time. So I would have imagined that downloading the 1509 Virtualbox, if I just rebuild, first of all, the channels and all the packages would be picked up from 1509, and that means you would not have to download any of this because it would have everything already packaged, but it doesn't. It's building. I think I figured it out once, but I forgot. Oh, so that's another thing. You have to actually do sudo whatever the last command was, and then we can rebuild the system configuration. So it detects that everything has changed, so it reboots, and we don't have a graphical login anymore. We're prompted with a terminal. At first I was puzzled because I was like, what? I didn't change anything. I just, issued the canonical rebuild NixOS, which is in the manual. And so I was puzzled by this. We still have the demo user, I think. Yes, we do. And I frankly don't know why we do have the demo user, because I was trying to see why when we rebuild that system we have this terminal user interface, and I think I understood. It all comes from the fact that the release, so when those images are published, it's built by the release.nix Nix expression, and we have the Virtualbox virtual appliance here, which takes the config of that expression and that expression imports virtualdemo.nix. So that's kind of a sub configuration which is imported, and virtualdemo.nix itself includes the profile, imports the profile demo.nix, which activates the graphical user interface and adds this demo user. So I could understand why you have a demo user in the original box, but when we rebuild it, NixOS configuration.nix, so we just have an import of virtualbox image.nix as a file as a specification for the future box, which will be activated when we rebuild. So ends the confusion. I mean, the configuration which allowed us to build that guest box, inside that guest box we have some file which does not contain the specification. It contains the specification for some other machine only specified by this Nix file, virtualbox image.nix. And if we see where this virtualbox image is, NixOS module, virtualization, virtualbox image, we see that it merely has a specification for the hard drive, just fixes some label. That I'm not sure. I mean, it doesn't concern the building the guest proper. It's just some specification for the previous steps. Anyway, I don't see the demo user here, but maybe there is. And we can see here that it's writing inside this box which is constructed. So this file is itself used in the release here to build the release, and it's referenced from within the box that's built by the release. But here I don't see any demo user. Anyway, and we certainly don't see the graphical. I mean, there's no activation at all. Anyway, so we have made that mistake. Let's just reboot, because that highlights the fact that we can always recover from our mistake by picking a previous configuration. So if I just boot that one, we recover the graphical user interface, and I can log in with the demo account. So we have started our box, and we would like to customize it according to the guides that are out there on NixOS. And if we take as a template the configuration which existed for the release, so we're gonna have to let's go release.next. We can see that it imported the modules installer virtualdemo.next, which we find here. And that one looks pretty good. So we can just import it. So we can import it, and that guy we can get rid of it. So if we save that file, now if we rebuild, if we sudo rebuild switch, it hopefully gives us the graphical user interface with the demo account after syncing quite a bit. And it found that not much has changed, and so it reloaded dbus.service, it restarted poolkit.service, but since the rest of the configuration didn't change, it didn't need to reboot and restart everything. But we could force the reboot, and we will later. And speaking of services, so there are ways to list the different services which exist on the system. We can do that by this command, system control list unit -type service. That will give us all the services which are activated, and we can have information there on their status with the same command, system control. That's the main command for interacting with the service themselves. System control status sshd, for instance. Not found. That's interesting. Okay, it's not part of my configuration. Otherwise it would be activated, but here we see that it's not activated. We can add it to the configuration. I added those commands, so this one is the real one which activates the service. And so if you want to find all those, if you want to navigate the commands available, you can go to NixOS option, search NixOS option. So if you do sshd, so it's OpenSSH actually, you have all the options. So in our case SSH, .enable. That sounds like a good one if you want to add this. And you have description, whether to enable SSH secure shell daemon. Okay, fine. Default value false, so we've given it true. And so that should be the command for activating upon rebuilding the OpenSSH. So I've added in a few extra command like password authentication, and this one is interesting as well. So this one you could find in the documentation, and it's pretty straightforward. The extra config, I will come back to it later, but this one I had to look at the sshd configuration and ask of the IRC extra config. See here, okay, verbatim content, and I mean that's what you can find here as well. Because I wanted to increase the verbosity level, and here you can't see any verbosity related option, and well, that's a good one. So it's a verbatim content. So in order to set that, I went to and did a man sshd. That pointed me to a configuration file, and it told me to look at sshd config, and when you look at here you have all the different options, and including the log level with the different levels that are available. Anyway, so that's the way, as I understand, to search for options is through this nixos.org option.html. So let's save and rebuild to see if it does what we think it does. Okay, the following new units were started, sshd.service, that sounds good. And indeed we have now sshd which runs. And you see that the box itself didn't reboot, because there's no need for it to reboot. The only thing that has changed is this sshd configuration, so it will take the appropriate action for this particular thing that changed. Let's imagine though that we want to force a reboot anyhow. We still have our graphical user interface. That's good. And let's bring up our trusted console. We have sshd which runs, and so the state as of now should be, it's exactly the same as it was before rebooting, but previously we didn't need to reboot to reach that state, which is a good thing to have. Let's continue to edit in the configuration. Oops. So the first thing you want to do usually is add user, and that's a typical thing to do. And so here I copy pasted, and actually there's an error, but I won't tell you now where this error is. But it took me some time to understand and debug, but that was also quite interesting. So I've added a user and Roland. I added the SSH key. Let's save and rebuild. So you can see that here it's building this enroll and authorize key. And in the setup of SSH, we have right here is services.openssh authorized key files. So we have the standards one, and we have this guy. And if we look up authorized keys. Actually, here we have just one authorized keys and called enrollment by the username, and that's the content, which is that thing which I inputted in my configuration file. So upon rebuilding the box, that file was added, and SSH is configured to look it up. But when I try to enter, it tells me that I cannot enter them because the key verification has failed. So that's kind of puzzling, but there's a good reason for that. And of course, since we've disabled the password SSH access, then the only way to enter is with this hotkey. Otherwise, it would have prompted for the password. If we want to investigate that, so that's the other part of a sshd, is that you have a command called journal control, which allows us to have access to the logs. So it's not in /var/auth.log, etc. We have this command journal control. There are many options, and one option is this sshd, well, -u and the service. So once you have the service name, you can do so. But if I do that, if I just do journal control -u, I have nothing. I was puzzled to see there was nothing. And actually, you have to do sudo that, and there you go. And there you have many interesting information. And if I do -f, it's like a tail. While I do this, I should see that it's been refused. There's this error, host key verification failed, because, as explained by the message, the identity behind this IP address and this port has changed, and I have requested strict checking. So every time it connects, it remembers a fingerprint, and probably behind that same address there was some other box with some other fingerprint. So I need to edit my .ssh known host file, which loads obviously agda and many other things. And so let's erase that line and save the file, quit. And now I can try again. It prompts me, do I trust this fingerprint? That's the first time I'm seeing it, so yes. And I don't have the host key verification failed, but I have permission denied, and I can see in the log that indeed I have authentication failure. We had seen that the configuration file puts as specified as asked by the sshd.nix expression. It makes an authentication key file and put it here, authorized key enroll, and that's the same, you know, looks very good. It looks very good, but it's almost looks good. If you really look into the details, actually this configuration I copy and pasted from another box which I knew was working using nano, and apparently nano, when you copy something too long, it adds some carriage return. So obviously the signature is wrong, so let's fix this. Save it. Yes. Yes. Rebuild the box. Here we go. And try to go in. And it works beautifully. So this highlights the point that when you're looking at something new, there are many things changing. In that case, nano and many other things, and so errors compound. So it's important to have reliable checkpoints and to use as few new tools as possible, because it's really easy to get confused, you know, on very simple things like the key is wrong, but why is it wrong? Because of some stupid thing, some very petty mistake, and mistake of, or strange behavior. That means you have to be double extra careful when you're looking at new things. That was the moral of the story. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it, and don't hesitate to put some comments. Enjoy using NixOS.